Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I want to look at the week starting on Monday, August the 4th, 2025. And it does look quite a difficult week. On paper, you might even say that it's the worst week in the year. Could be, at least on paper. Of course, that's very theoretical, and just because it seems problematic doesn't always mean it turns out that way. So, as far as what I want to do in this video, I want to start off by looking at the main astrological events over the course of the week, and there are quite a few. And then I want to turn to the I Ching, and my I Ching reading just covers the week, and I have 4 sections: general section, then money, then career, and then relationships. So that's the structure of this video. It's going to be pretty short, I would think. So now let's get going and look at the week ahead. So here are the start positions of the planets on Monday, August 4th, 2025. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And so I've set this chart for midnight on Monday, August the 4th, New York time. So how does it all begin? So to begin with, we've got the Sun in Leo and the Moon in Sagittarius. The good way to start the week, isn't it? Sun trine the Moon. It's Moon in Sagittarius, Sun in Leo. That might say something good about Monday in terms of how we're going to experience it. And also on Sunday, you can see that the Sun and Jupiter are making a semi-sextile. So there it is, Sun and Jupiter. Sun at 12 degrees Leo, Jupiter at 12 degrees Cancer. In terms of that semi-sextile, it's semi-sextile can be a challenging aspect, and the challenge is to make the most of what we have. Sun in Leo wants to go in one particular direction. That's a good thing. Sun in Leo, wants to be successful, but it's trying to incorporate something else. It's trying to incorporate Jupiter in Cancer, and so Jupiter in Cancer, you might say, is perhaps more emotional than the Sun in Leo. So in order to really make the most of everything, we do have to tune into our feelings, and also we have to be magnanimous. So I think that is perhaps a challenge for some of us. I'm not saying that we have to be stupidly generous, hand out lots of money, that kind of thing, but in terms of our attitude to other people, maybe it's about giving people a chance, and yes, being magnanimous. And then Tuesday, we've got a quintile between the Sun and Uranus. So far, all sort of pretty gentle. Sun quintile Uranus is about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve. And so, the Sun, again, Sun in Leo, and we're trying to do something special, something that stands out. In quintile, that's a 72-degree aspect. You can see the Sun and Uranus is sort of about 72 degrees apart. That's 1/5 of the circle. And so, we're trying to do something different, and we're trying to get noticed, and perhaps be original. And we can do it, but you think about originality as being something spontaneous, but I would argue that there isn't much of it spontaneous about a quintile aspect. So if we want to be original and make a real impression, then we might have to think about it, and some planning might be required. So Monday and Tuesday, so far so good. Now it's on Wednesday that the problems start, because on Wednesday we have Mars moving into Libra. So we've had Mars, moving through Virgo for some time, and then let's find out, when that is exactly. Okay, it might be on Thursday. So Thursday, it depends on your time zone, but sort of Wednesday, Thursday, we've got Mars moving into Libra, and that is a change, because we have had Mars moving through Virgo for the last sort of month or two, and the thing about Libra, well, it's the Aries point. Well, it's opposite the Aries point. Mars is crossing a cardinal point. So, when Mars crosses a cardinal point, that can very much emphasize Mars. Mars is the planet of war, the planet of aggression, the planet of getting annoyed. And so annoyance is manifest on a public stage, because we're talking about the Aries point, and Aries is the public stage, or the Libra point, but Libra is opposition Aries. So that is where things manifest. And things are made more complicated by the fact that the sun is going to move on, and by midweek the sun will be at 15 degrees Leo. Now that is a big deal. 15 degrees Leo is halfway between the solstice and the equinox, because you've got the solstice at the end of June, you've got the equinox coming up, the end of September. Sun is halfway there. It's also 45 degrees from the Aries point. So what you have midweek, as you move into Thursday, you've got the Sun semi-square Mars on the Aries point. Sun. So you've got Mars at 0 degrees Libra, you've got Sun at 15 degrees Leo. 45 degrees apart. That's a heavy-duty aspect, and particularly as it's on the Aries point. And that may raise the temperature, perhaps the international temperature. We know that things aren't entirely stable at the moment, are they? There are plenty of flashpoints. Ukraine comes to mind. You've got Donald's deadline. There's supposed to be a ceasefire. I can't remember when it is, but it's supposed to be pretty soon. Is it this week? It's supposed to be, or else Donald's going to do, well, what else? He's got 2 nuclear submarines, he's saying, off the coast of Russia. I don't think that means much. It's just Donald was annoyed. His ego got damaged by Russia refusing to back down. But it's not great, is it? And so that's coming up. But then Sun makes a semi-square to Mars, and then it moves on, and by Friday Sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Saturn, because Saturn is actually quite close to the Aries point. Saturn is at 1 degree 32 Aries. So Sun is hitting Mars and Saturn. That's not good. Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn is about limitation. Things are not working. Hitting a brick wall, getting frustrated, and what does one do when one is frustrated? And and on Friday, when we've got Sun sesquiquadrate Saturn, we've also got Mars trine Uranus. Mars trine Uranus. Well, trine, that's a nice aspect, isn't it? But it's Mars and Uranus. You could say with a trine, Mars trine Uranus, bad things happen easily. That's for trine. Explosive events. So that's really something that we need to be aware of. And then on Saturday we get Mars opposition Saturn. Mars in Libra opposition Saturn in Aries. That's a really, really tough aspect, and it's a dangerous aspect. Remember, Mars and Saturn are the death pair. And it's happening at the same time as, Mars is opposition Neptune as well. So Mars is opposition the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So you could say that we're seeing the Saturn-Neptune in all its horror, glory, however you want to see it. And so it manifests in terms of anger, bad events, people feeling frustrated and feeling they have to do something. And then at the same time, we've got a full moon. We've got a full moon. So where exactly is? It's at 17 Aquarius, isn't it? So we've got a full moon at 17 Aquarius, happening while all this is going on. So it's not looking good this week. And then Sunday you've got Mars trine Pluto, and then the beginning of next week you've got Mercury going stationary direct. We should always be aware of that. When you've got Mercury going stationary direct, fairly close to a full moon, so you've got these two changes happening close to one another. That can have an impact. It can have an impact, for example, on the markets. And I do like to emphasize when I'm talking about the markets that this channel is for entertainment purposes only. The reason I say that is because I don't want people doing anything financially on the basis of me. I mean, this is just astrology. I might get it wrong, but I have observed. I may have observed this wrongly, and my sample might be incorrect. But when you do have Mercury going stationary direct, fairly close to a lunation within a couple of days, you can get changes in the market. The market can go up, the market can go down. But we already can see that the markets are unstable. When I'm making this video on August the 2nd, over the last 24 hours, for example, the end of the week, sort of on Thursday, Friday, the August the 1st, the markets went down quite a lot. Well, except the metals and Bitcoin. From what I'm seeing now, from a viewpoint of August the 2nd, Bitcoin is down considerably. It peaked at 123,000 and it's now 113,000. I mean, Bitcoin is quite unstable. It's quite volatile. But maybe because of that volatility, it's more sensitive to astrological events than other things like the Standard & Poor. I mean, with stock market indices, and so maybe that could be sort of the canary in the coal mine. It might be, so do look at the markets. But astrologers can mess it up. Astrologers can get obsessed about these movements. Seeing these astrological events, getting excited about it, like I've got excited about it now. I've been perhaps melodramatic about it, and everyone gets worked up about it, and then nothing happens, and so it could all come to nothing. So we have to be aware of that, and we just have to see astrology as just being another tool. And if astrology sort of links up with other things, things going on in the economy, or if you're into the markets and technical analysis, it might fit with whatever your graph shows. But overall, I think this is a very dangerous week astrologically, but it is on paper. I may be wrong, and so now I want to transition to the I Ching, and so do remember this I Ching reading is optional. If you don't want to have your I Ching read, you can stop watching the video. It only applies to those who are watching the I Ching section of this video. So if you're somewhere else watching another video, not listening to me, what I say is meaningless as far as you're concerned. So remember, this I Ching reading has 4 sections. There is a general section. There is a money section, then career, and finally relationships. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on August the 4th, Monday, August the 4th, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 24. And hexagram 24 represents the return, as you can see. Something has changed. You can see that you've got all these broken lines, but then at the bottom you've got this unbroken line, and that represents the change. Maybe things are returning to normal. That's how it should be, and it could be that we feel that things have gone far enough, that we've taken something as far as we possibly can, and we now understand the way things are. And because of that understanding, we're in a position to say, well, okay, we get it, and we retreat. Okay, it's not retreat as in sort of humiliation. Maybe it's not even a retreat. We just want to just return to how it used to be. And we did our exploration, and we saw things which were interesting. We might have seen things which were worrying, but now we want to return to normal. But there can be a problem, and the problem would be that we take things too far, we don't really realize that we've taken things too far. And rather than returning, we plough on. And ploughing on is not necessarily a good idea. It's kind of like if you're in a hole, you stop digging and you say, well, this is not working, and so we get out of the hole. But some people decide to keep going, or you double down. Or another analogy, if we're talking about markets, or the economy, is the sunken cost fallacy, isn't there? That you stay with something because you've already spent so much money on it that you might as well just continue. And so that could be an issue here. And there is going to be a real temptation here, because the top line does move, and the top line moving indicates that we're not going to want to return. We're going to want to keep going. And the I Ching is not comfortable about that. It's saying that we had a chance to return. We had a chance to return to normality, but we missed that chance. And if we miss that chance, then things can go wrong very quickly. The I Ching is quite graphic about it. It talks about defeat, and it also talks about 10 years of bad luck. That's extreme, but you have to think about it. So it depends what you're doing, what you're involved with, and if something isn't working, then just stop. Okay, you don't have to stop. I'm not telling you to stop. Remember, this is just, it's just an I Ching. It's just my opinion. And of course, it's just for the week ahead. But, if things are going too far, stop. Or else things could go very badly wrong. And, we do have a moving line. The top line moves. And I would have said that the top line is what matters here. We should be looking at that top line. Maybe we shouldn't be worrying too much about the hexagram it moves to. But the warning is, if you carry on with something beyond the point of return, then you could get yourself into trouble. And I'm wondering whether this hexagram is not just talking about us as individuals, but it's talking about what's going on in the world. There are a lot of people who don't necessarily know when to stop. They could stop. They go past the point of return, and there are all sorts of bad things. Now, for example, if you look at Ukraine, well, that kind of depends on your perspective. If you were looking at this from a pro-Ukrainian point of view, you would say, oh, well, Russia needs to stop. If Russia goes any further, keeps going with its war. It's probably how Trump would interpret it. If Trump doesn't have his ceasefire, well, it's going to be all sorts of bad things are going to happen. And so that could be a manifestation there. But if you're looking at it from a pro-Russian perspective, you could see Trump ramping up his sanctions and talking about sanctions. Maybe he needs to just stop talking so much. He's sending nuclear submarines. He's overreacting to what, if you're pro-Russian, you might well regard it as being an internal issue. Why is Trump interfering? He needs to stop. He needs to return. Things need to return to normal. So there are different ways of looking at it from an international perspective. And although I have my own views, I'm just saying that you could look at this in two different ways if you want to look at this hexagram sort of from an international perspective. Now, this hexagram moves because we've got the top line moving. So what does it move to? And it moves to hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. And corners of the mouth is rather a different hexagram. You could say that the corners of the mouth is about talking. It's about the lips, negotiation. And so it might be offering a possibility here. If you look at it from an international perspective, you might say, well, things reach a certain point. Things, you have this complete breakdown, but then you've got to start talking. Again, that might say something about Ukraine or some other flashpoint. That's not the same as a ceasefire, by the way. I mean, that's what Trump really wants, but you've got to talk. And talking could dissolve the tension. So on a personal level, if you find that you've taken something too far, then what do you do now? Well, it might be a situation where you have to talk yourself out of trouble. So that might be one approach. Also, corners of the mouth, you have to think about what sustains you, and if you have taken something too far, you have to think about logistics and your lines of supplies, and you need to eat, and perhaps you have gone too far. You are far away from your supply stores, and so you need to eat, and so that might force some return on you. And also with the corners of the mouth, it's how does one judge people who have gone too far? And it may not just be us taking things too far beyond that point of return. It may be other people, and how do we judge them? And the corners of the mouth is saying you judge them by what they eat, what's important to them, whether it's power or money or something else, and because you're asking why are they doing what they're doing. Why are you doing what you're doing? And that's a good question. So if you are taking something too far, if you miss the point of return, or indeed if someone else misses the point of return, ask yourself why. What's at stake? It could be ego, even. Certainly if you're talking about Trump, I think Trump's ego has a lot to do with it. But it could be our own ego if we're involved in something. And so if it's just ego, well, what's the point? Or it could be something else. It could be money. I mean, we feel we have to take something too far from financial reasons, because of our financial well-being. It requires it, or it might be something, might be something else. So let me now turn to money itself. So looking at things from a financial perspective, I don't know what you're planning on doing with your money, what you are doing with your money, and I'm not here to give you financial advice. This is not a financial channel. But with return, you may be involved with something of a financial nature. You may be planning on doing something with your money, and you may be in the process of doing it. You may have sort of money at stake, and you're perhaps thinking about some kind of expenditure. You may be involved in negotiations. You may be just getting ready to sign on the dotted line. And with return, if we talk about it as on an individual basis, on an individual basis, you've always got choices. Even if a hexagram is a problem. So it could be that you've done your research, you've taken something as far as you possibly can, and you're starting to realize that actually it's a bad idea, that spending this money, committing this money, it's not going to necessarily work. It could be throwing good money after bad, and it might be about cutting your losses, or even not committing at all to anything, and then you just return to normal and crisis over. And that might be how the week resolves itself. Unfortunately, with that top line moving, there is a strong temptation to just continue. You have made a commitment. You've made a decision. You're going to plow on. You might know or feel that it could be a bad decision, but you're just going to ignore that impulse, and you are going to carry on, or you could carry on. And if you continue with a dangerous financial enterprise, or if we're just dealing with any sums of money that are perhaps too much for you, you can't necessarily afford. It may be something you're buying. Who knows? Maybe you want to buy a new kitchen. You've decided on this, or buy a new car. You have your doubts, but you think you're going to go for it, you can somehow get the money together. I'm not giving you financial advice, but the I Ching is warning you that, perhaps when it comes to money, large financial expenditures, particularly if you're feeling unsure about it, you're feeling you're slightly outside your financial comfort zone. When you're like that, ideally you would stop, but it's going to be really difficult to stop. Maybe you're in conversation with a salesperson and they're pushing you, and you've made a promise and you don't want to break your promise, and it's expected of you, so you'll carry on, but you shouldn't carry on. Or you should consider just calling a halt. And if you can do that, you might save yourself a lot of trouble. But it's going to be very difficult to call a halt because of that top line. It really wants you to plough on. And we do have a moving line, so that means we do move to a second hexagram, which is the corners of the mouth. Now, corners of the mouth could be about negotiation, getting yourself into a difficult financial situation, perhaps, and trying to talk yourself out of it. Or maybe you've made a commitment and you're trying to get out of the commitment, or you're about to make a commitment and you're really close to signing on a dotted line and there's pressure. And that's where the talking comes, because corners of the mouth is about talking, and there are things you've got to say. And so that would be one way of looking at it. The corners of the mouth is also saying you've got to eat. And so if you've spent a lot of money on something that, you've made the commitment and you've gone through all the way, corners of the mouth, it may have an impact on your ability to sustain yourself. If we're talking about a large amount of money, a sum of money that you feel uncomfortable with, you really should give it some second thoughts, a lot of second thoughts, because overall the I Ching is saying don't take things further. Sure, explore something, explore the possibility of spending money. What would it be like to have a new car or a new kitchen, or to do something else, something that you strictly speaking can't afford. Maybe you'll be able to afford it, but maybe not. And the I Ching is saying probably not. And perhaps the corners of the mouth is asking you to do some long-term financial planning, because it is about sustenance. How are you going to sustain yourself? It's not just about food. It's about paying the bills, and just maybe you might sort of tip yourself over if you spend that money, and it might take a long time to resolve. Remember, with this hexagram 24 return, that top line talks about 10 years to resolve it. I'm not saying it's going to be 10 years, but the overall message is when it comes to money, you do have to be very careful, and it's very important that you don't take things too far. And then we turn to career and business. It kind of depends on your situation, doesn't it? Maybe you don't have a job, maybe you're retired, maybe this whole issue is not important to you. If it is important to you, if you do have a job, or if you have a business, you're making investment decisions or expansion decisions about your business, then you're exploring something, you're considering something, and you've gone quite a long way down a particular road, and you've perhaps been thinking about a particular action. It could be getting a new job, expanding your business, or even just going into business, starting a new business, and you've explored it as much as you can, and now logically it's a time to return. You've taken things as far as you can, and you've seen how it is, and maybe it's not for you, maybe it's not for you at this particular moment in time, but there is nonetheless a temptation to just keep going. Whatever course of action you've created for yourself, you just want to continue doing it, and you want to take things further, and you want to take what is temporary and make it permanent. And that's what happens when you pass a point of return or no return. And if that happens, there's a real possibility that it doesn't end well. Perhaps you've taken on too much, That might be the case if you're running your own business. You invest, or you too much, or you take on more work than you can handle, or you say you can do something which you perhaps can't. And so that is a problem. And likewise, if you're an employee, you might say you're going to do something. You might take on new responsibilities. You might say you can do something which perhaps you can't do it, and it's all on you. And then you realize that actually you're not up to it, and you could have retreated, you could have backed off, but you decided not to, and that could create a mess. And the question is, then what do you do? Your top line moves, and so that moves us to a new hexagram, which is hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. It could be a situation where you can talk your way out of it. You perhaps created a bad situation for yourself at work or in your business, and you have to explain why you can't see it through. And in the process, you could embarrass yourself. No one wants to admit that they're wrong, but it's better than just continuing as if nothing had happened, as if you really can handle it. Because the further you go, the more difficult it is to be. And so where are you going to call where are you going to call a halt to it? Don't they say that the first cut is the cheapest cut? So that might be how you need to think about it. Where do you pause? Where do you stop? And if you don't stop, you might have to explain yourself, and that's not something that you necessarily want to do. Not necessarily, it's something you absolutely do not want to do. And finally, there's relationships, and this section can apply to relationships, of all kinds. Not just romantic relationships, but just people it could feed into sort of career. It could be a partnership, someone you're involved with, and with return, you may find yourself spending time with another person, and another person may be having an increasing amount of sort of influence on you, and sort of a relationship goes further, it goes deeper, it becomes more intense, and in the process you get to know about someone, you get to know about what they're really like. And we do have a moving line, the top line moves, and everyone has their limits. You have your limits, and there's always not always, but there's often a point where you need to stop getting to know someone. You know them well enough, and you don't have to take you don't have to take it further. But the problem is, you might be tempted to take it further. A relationship, you're just talking too much. I mean, it could be anything. It's like one of those spam calls where someone calls you. Their only intention is to part you from your money. It's their intention is to rip you off. And you could say that is about a relationship. You have a relationship with someone who's trying to rip you off. And they say about these phone calls that the quicker you end the phone call, the better. I mean, ideally you hang up in the first second, but if you carry on with that phone call, you're tempted to start to give more and more details about yourself. You start to engage in what this person is saying. You start to they start making you worried. They say, well, did you know that your account is compromised? And, if you could just do this, and can you just confirm your email, please? And, it just goes on and on and on. And this is perhaps how return could work in certain relationships, particularly those casual relationships. Well, not casual, but relationships you have on the phone with someone that's trying to rip you off. Or, I don't know, do people have door-to-door salesmen anymore? Or someone trying to who doesn't really have your best interests at heart. And the deeper you go, the worse it gets, and then in the end you might accidentally compromise yourself and be in real trouble. So return is warning about you there. So it doesn't matter what the relationship is, and it may be with someone you're already in a relationship with. You don't want to take things too far at this moment in time. You want to maintain the status quo and how things were before, or is it the status quo antebellum? Maybe there's been a big sort of conflict recently, but you don't want to proceed, and you need to call a halt. And that applies to all relationships, even if you're talking about people you know very well, you like them. You don't want any relationship to get stronger. You want things to stay as they are, because if you give the wrong signals, then you might get yourself into a situation that could be difficult to get out of. And well, in this case, if the top line moves, well, it could be disastrous. So that's certainly a possibility. So relationships do have to be treated very carefully, and you should probably not be looking for gains or looking for relationships to get stronger or more fulfilling, except perhaps if you're dealing with someone you already know and you trust them and everything is fine. But in most cases, just be careful. And then the top line moves, and the top line moving is sort of 27. And so the question is, what might go wrong if you've taken something too far with another person and you're having second thoughts? Well, what does happen? Well, corners of the mouth can be about just talking yourself out of trouble. How do you explain? You're having to explain to someone, well, you didn't really mean that, and you didn't want it to go that far, and you do need your space, and you need to back off, and that kind of thing. It's not necessarily about a romantic relationship. It could be about any relationship, but you don't want to have a situation where you are forced to explain to get yourself out of trouble. It's unnecessary, because if you had just stopped right at the beginning, if you just held back, you wouldn't be having to have difficult conversations. And additionally, the corners of the mouth, when we're talking about relationships, it is telling you about how to judge someone. And if you find yourself involved in a relationship, whatever that relationship is, and how do you recognize that it's a bad relationship? Because bad relationships are available this week, or relationships that are bad when they go beyond a certain point, when they go beyond the point of no return, or they threaten to go beyond the point of no return. And you can judge it by what people find to be important, what nourishes people. And you might realize that someone in your life are nourished by something which is really unhealthy, and which is a real sign of them not being the kind of person that you want to get too close to. So those are my thoughts on this week, the week starting on Monday, August the 4th. I've looked at the astrology and I've looked at the I Ching, and in a way the astrology and the I Ching seem to support each other. And I think it may be a very difficult week. Is it going to be the worst week of the year? In theory. In practice, probably not. And of course, when I say the worst week of the year, I'm looking at it in a very general sense, sort of in a global way. Certainly the most tense week of the year astrologically, but on a personal level, we can organize our lives in different ways, and all of us have got different destinies. So we shouldn't be too downcast. There's always opportunities, and as we saw with the I Ching, just because there's a temptation to go down a terrible road doesn't mean to say that we have to give in to that temptation. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.